Inspiration Forge.
Welcome to Inspiration Forge. This is John, aka the Angry Dwarf. Let's take a look at what we're building today. So today's build is a merchant wagon. It's a covered wagon with a team of 2 horses. We'll be covering how to make the wagon, the curved roof, an interior, which we'll go into in the video, and a set of horse harnesses. This is the new methodology that I came up with. I think it looks a lot better. It's also a little bit easier if you know how to do it. So let's take a look at the build now. This is what the final product will look like. The merchant's wagon is based on the same frame as the basic medieval wagon I built earlier. Essentially a farmer's wagon. See the link to the video for that build. I used foam core again as a chassis for its rigidity. The ends and the seat area will be different to accommodate the higher walls and doors for this merchant's wagon. I lengthened the chassis to make the merchant wagon larger to accommodate a sleeping pallet and goods. I kept the width the same for scale on roads and going through gates. I initially made my ends out of peeled foam core, since I love how well it takes detail versus the paper covering. The design I came up with was narrow to attach to the lower sidewalls of the base of the wagon and flared to create more space above. I changed the length of the front door to allow a seat area and imagined a more sort of peekaboo functionality rather than heavy traffic, so made the door split. The back door I made full length. It was as I fit this back door that I found that the peeled foam core was too floppy and made the decision to switch to the good quality unpeeled foam core. Here's the foam core that I used. Once I had cut up and assembled the ends and sides, I tried to cover up the exposed ends of the foam core with wood filler. This worked pretty well, but once painted I saw some areas that I should have filled twice. I textured the outer paper as well as I could with an Exacto knife, and even cut entirely through this when doing the boards on one side. In this case, I used pins to fix that problem. Here's a close-up of the front doors and the driver's seat. I think I actually forgot to do any wood filler on this end. I added a side drop-down window that could function as a counter to sell goods from. Here's another angle of the front end, including the supports for the driver's seat. When cutting the roof, make certain that you do not cut all the way through, and you may feel that when you go to break it. You'll see that this one isn't, so it's better to actually let the foam sort of snap. You'll hear that nice little crackle sound as you go across. There's another one. So that when you're done, you can get that sort of flexed side of the wagon. So if I was using this for the smaller wagon, that would probably be about the size that I want. So it all depends on how big a roof and how much you're going to flare that out, and that'll determine the size that you want. A very easy way to get a curved roof, which you could literally use on anything, whether it be a wagon or a house or boat or some kind of a shack. Same technique is supposed to be used for building barrels. I haven't quite got that working on a miniature scale yet, but there you go. Then for peeling this, because this doesn't take the texturing very well, what I did is just simply got my knife up underneath here and very gently, cutting away from myself, work my way along the board like this. You're going to cut away some of the foam, which is okay. There's still lots left for texturing with. And I saved these. I haven't quite found a use for them yet. Might end up being shingles or something, but I saved a lot of them because, well, you just save everything as a crafter. You'll see, I mean, if you're particular about it, you can get a better cut than that, but I just went around and fixed up anything that was a bit of an issue. Cutting towards my fingers again, aren't I? And then when it comes to texturing it, I usually use a smaller knife, but it takes those lines much better. And if you're like me and you like putting knot holes and everything, you can do that as well. And in my case, I really am looking for sort of that rustic, weathered look. So the fact that the board itself is not the same dimensions all the way along really will help that when it takes paint. Bracing the roof was important in order to maintain the curve that you want, and also to provide strength to the roof as it's designed to be taken on and off. To texture the roof, I tried making the roof boards with a texture themselves, but texturing that paper was just too much of a pain. So what I did is I just peeled off the paper on each board, which was actually really easy to do as opposed to peeling a whole sheet, and then textured the foam underneath, which worked much better. I'm going to go over the horse's harness. Basically what we're looking at is the traces that go back to the actual wagon, the horse collar, strapping that goes onto the horse itself. So to make one of these, you're obviously going to need horses. Again, dollar store find. The other bits that you're going to need are these little rings. And so I'm putting a pencil in here so you can sort of see the scale to it. You're going to need some of these shorter zip ties. They're approximately 4 inches long. You'll need 4 for each horse, 5 rings for each horse, and essentially some crazy glue. So the first step is putting the banding on the horse itself. You'll see it fits really nicely in these 2 parts sort of either side of the horse's ribs there. And then you band them underneath. When you cut off the bits, people won't notice these. They're very easily hidden underneath the legs of the horse. Now, before you actually band these, you're going to want to put 2 rings onto the zip tie. And before you tighten up the zip tie itself, you're going to want to make certain that you've got 1 ring on either side of the horse's body. And if you can, you want to position them approximately halfway from the top and the bottom for the horse here. And then snug up that band. Once you're secure with that, you've got it as tight as you can, snip it off. You also want to make certain that the rings are not lying flat against the horse's body, but instead that they're sticking out almost at a 90-degree angle, because you're going to need to thread some strapping through there. So once you've got the 2 bands on, so each one of the bands will have a ring on either side of it, then you're going to make this. And this is probably the trickiest part of the whole build, at least it was for me, was just getting the crazy glue to glue here without gluing my fingers. And the trick I found to that was finding some sort of a clamp. It just made it so much easier. So you feed the ring around, bend the back over, and then simply just clamp that on to dry, and then just use another clamp to do the same thing. Once you've got this assembly made, you're going to want to snip off the brackets at each end. And this is a shortened one, that's why I still have it. It's not wasn't long enough. You're going to want the full length of this. So make certain that once you've made your ring harness at the end, that you only cut off the tiniest bit at the end there, so you've got as much of this length as you can. Once you've got this made, then you're going to want to thread one side of the strapping down through on one side of the horse, and then rotate it around and grab the other side and thread that through. And that's why it's really important to have these rings standing out. Makes it so much easier. Once you've got them all the way through, you want to snug it down to the chest as much as you can, and then you're going to cut off and then glue the bits to the wooden framework. So what I found really worked really nicely for attaching to the wagon here was to use the cut-off pieces here, the little lumps, because they were almost enough just to bring it up. You'll find that these don't want to bend down, they want to come straight across. So to bridge that gap there, I used these, I glued them on and then glued the traces to that, and that worked out really well. The final component to the build for the traces here is to use some washers. For the horses' collars, I used washers. I had pre-cut them and glued them into a teardrop shape, but discovered once I put them on the horses it wasn't quite sitting the way I wanted it to. So at this point, I then took an Exacto knife and cut them into a little bit more of a horseshoe shape with a little bit of an angle so they would sit down and glue onto the existing harness a little better. It took a little bit of tries to get the angle right, but you'll sort of see once you do it yourself what fits best onto that collar and glues down. This looked much better than having them sit independent of the horse's harness. And it sort of makes a little bit more sense that they be attached that way. So I test fitted it to make certain that I got the angle I was happy with, and then carefully crazy glued this up. Want to make certain you get enough on there, but not too much. So you'll see that I noticed a little bit more. I tapped some of it off, and then carefully put it on and held it in place here. And there you go. Having completed the exterior, I decided to create some interior details. Some bolts of cloth, which is basically paper towel colored with a marker and just wrapped around a bamboo skewer and glued with some PVA glue. The narrow shelves I made out of peeled foam core to get some of the detailing on the wood. Here are the shelves just glued and pinned in place. I added some barrels, crates, and a strong box I made earlier. I'll try to get a video up on my barrel building adventure. Here's some close-up details of the build in progress, complete with the pins you can still see and the glue threads on the wheel. Some final glamour shots. Lex Supra couldn't resist getting in on. Here's the interior look at the wagon from the front, steps on the back, and the final product. So, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please click like and subscribe, and remember that bell. If you'd like to find more of my content, you can check me out on Facebook. If you like some merchandise, I have a store on TeePublic, both of those under the Angry Dwarf. And if you're at all interested in fantasy maps or would like to commission a map, you can check out my site, williamsonsmaps.com. This is John, aka the Angry Dwarf, signing off.